test, which is a test for a hepatitis B core antibody, which is a surrogate test for AIDS, although it doesn't mean that that person has AIDS.
The test is so relatively simple and relatively inexpensive that we can allow ourselves the luxury of screening out every last possible source of infected blood.
Does it mean if you belong to these categories you have a greater chance of contracting AIDS?
It depends how you define that. In terms of the individual in the street, absolutely not. But what we are concerned with is to exclude every last remote possibility of inadvertently infecting somebody. And so we go to perhaps extraordinary lengths to exclude anybody who might have been infected.
Do you think there's a chance of people overreacting?
Oh yes, very much so. Whenever we try to devise these kind of safeguards, we have to balance this up. On one hand, there is the safety of the community as a whole, and on the other hand, there is the well-being and peace of mind of the individuals that we are excluding.
Now, you've just attended an international conference on AIDS. What was the general message from that?
There were a variety of messages. The first message is that AIDS is not something that's going to go away, that we can confidently anticipate that the number of cases will continue to double at perhaps 6 or 8 monthly intervals, that the cost of looking after these people will be very, very high and will continue to double at about the same rate.
The exhibition is significant because it's the largest collection of works by Jessie Trowell to be displayed in Australia. All of the works are privately owned and most are from the personal collections of her family. Jessie Trowell is prominent as a pioneer in Australian art. The curator of Australian prints from the National Gallery in Canberra, Roger Butler, who opened the exhibition, says she was one of the few Australian women to work with etchings and one of a handful of artists who focused on industrial subjects.
The most unusual thing is that she's working in etching. This was traditionally very much a male domain. Large presses had to be used, acids, all sorts of technical items which weren't usually associated with women.
Mr. Butler also said Jessie Trowell's work typified the pioneering quality of women's art in Australia in the 1930s.
Certainly that whole period from 1900 to 1950s or late 1940s must be considered the women of that period were far better than the males. In fact, the women up until the 1940s led Australian art.
Most of us have seen Aboriginal dancing at one time or another, but few do it better than David Golferell and his fellow performers Bobby Byinger and Roy Benalla. All three are from Arnhem Land, and since last September have spent most of their time on a national tour. It was organised by the Department of Aboriginal Affairs to increase awareness of Aboriginal culture amongst whites. David is the star of the show, one of Australia's best-known Aboriginal faces, after his acclaimed performances in the movie Walkabout, Storm Boy and The Last Wave. The performance in the mall was only one of several engagements on their busy Newcastle schedule. Tomorrow they visit the Wyong Tech College and the Mount Penang Training School. The tour continues along the North Coast and will climax in June when the trio visit Japan to perform at the Tokyo Trade Expo.
The exhibition is titled Pots from the Waddigans. That may have been where they were produced, but that's where the correlation ends. Most of the pots have a Japanese influence, as potter Bruce Pryor explains.
From early Japanese and Korean pottery, mainly Asian work.
It took Bruce just 2 months to produce the 84 pieces for the exhibition. He says it's a labour of love, and that's why it's sometimes hard to part with his works.
Generally, I think I'm in love with them all. It's very difficult to sort of say which, having worked, spent so many hours on all the individual parts. I know them all, and it's very difficult to say, well, this one or that one. I have a few sort of favourites, but generally I find that I've put myself into all of them, so I like them all.
Large crowds gathered to see the aftermath of the accident. A Ford Meteor sedan buried nose deep in the side of a house on the corner of Lead Road and Chapel Street at Hampton South. The driver, Cafe Anthony Paul from that account, escaped shaken but completely unhurt. He told us he had suffered a blackout while entering Lead Road from Chapel Street. The car became airborne and punched a hole through the double brick wall and into a children's bedroom. Luckily, no one was home at the time.
As conventions go, it was unconventional.
1, 2, 3.
They spent the entire weekend acting like a bunch of clowns, which is what they are. From 25 states, more than 450 came for the 16th annual Clowns of America convention. As at similar gatherings, a number of motions had to be introduced. Delegates were known on a first-name basis: Sniffles, Stinky, and hundreds more.
My name is Bubblegum Tea Clown, and what I like most about clowning is caring and sharing, because sharing is caring. I love you.
It's great, just to make people happy. There's nothing more rewarding than that in the world, I don't think. Right, Trigger?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
The Newcastle Regional Art Gallery has been a venue for ballet performance, but judging by the response, the experiment was a resounding success. The program by the Hunter Valley Dance Ensemble and the New Moon Ensemble was watched by 350 delighted children and adults. The ensembles perform in schools throughout the Hunter Valley, and the holiday performances in Newcastle, Maitland and Singleton this week are aimed at making dance as exciting an experience as possible. Meanwhile, at Charlestown Square Shopping Centre, the New South Wales Youth Brass Band is going to its cases for the shoppers. The band chooses new members each year, and this year there are 8 musicians from the Newcastle area. These holidays the band will tour northern Newcastle.
The Little Athletics Camp at Mayuna Bay began on Sunday, and since then those participating haven't stopped. More than 80 athletes have gathered together from as far as Sydney, Woolgoolga, Taree, Armidale and Coffs Harbour. 4 major teams have been formed, and together they compete over the week-long camp for the highest point score in events such as cross-country running, orientation, grass skiing and bike riding. Today's big event was the obstacle course, and young Tim Patterson from Newcastle described what he liked best about the camp.
Because you meet new people and more friends.
Meanwhile, more than 20 children at the Lake Macquarie Community Centre were allowed to get their hands grubby as they tested their artistic talents. Animals, houses and many interesting objects emerged from the clay as the artists obviously enjoyed what they were doing. The potter's wheel was put to good use, and with a little help from the teacher, dishes and jugs appeared before the children's eyes from slabs of clay. Over at the Lake Macquarie Shopping Centre, both kids and adults were entertained with the Captain Kids Family Fun Show. Andy the Pirate, Coco the Clown and lots of Captain Kids ran competitions and gave out lots of prizes. But the biggest attraction was the gorilla, and it was up to the kids and the captain to catch him. For the parents, the 2 one-hour shows a day at the shopping centre at 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock are a great idea to take the kids to if after only 3 days you're already feeling the strain of the school holiday. Good on you, Coco.
More than 200 nurses from various hospitals throughout the Hunter attended the meeting. The Association's General Secretary, Jenny Haynes, condemned the State Health Minister, Ron Mueller, for announcing on Tuesday that the nurses had accepted the government's 38-hour week package. She said the government's terms were still unacceptable to the association and described Mr Muehl's actions as a curious way of carrying out negotiations. Nurses at the meeting voted overwhelmingly to continue fighting for a 38-hour week on their own terms. A majority of branches throughout the state have already endorsed industrial action.
The industrial action we will be taking from the 13th of May, if there's no agreement between the department and the association by the 10th of May, starts with bans on non-nursing duties next Monday, the 13th of May. Then we follow up with further bans in the following week and stoppages in the week beginning the 27th of May.
With the stoppage, what effect do you think a walkout by nurses will have?
I think that nurses will be very effective in their walkout. Certainly the association has always taken a responsible position in relation to stoppages, in that we have provided skeleton staffing so that patient care is maintained. It is simply that less nurses are around.
With the present staff shortages and problems in the public hospitals due to the Medicare dispute, is your action ill-timed?
I think that the nurses have been waiting for a long time for their 38-hour week. Mr Rand himself has recognised that nurses are entitled to the 38-hour week because of the service we have done to the hospital system throughout the doctors' dispute. I believe he made that statement up here in Newcastle quite recently. The Nurses Association has been waiting a long time for the 38-hour week. Our negotiations have been a completely separate issue to the doctors' negotiations. Nurses are entitled to improvements in their working conditions. In fact, we must have improvements in working conditions if we are to maintain nurses in nursing.
Of Northampton had been spending the school holidays with his 3 brothers on his uncle's farm at Burrell. This morning he was riding a mini bike when he was thrown into a strand of barbed wire. Luke suffered a severely lacerated throat and is now in a fair condition after being brought to the Royal by the rescue helicopter. None of his brothers, all older than Luke, was injured in the mishap.
Yes, it's very, very unique to New South Wales particularly. It's a sort of a cross-country come point-to-point come steeplechase race.
Right, right. So time is important.
Time is the deciding factor on who wins, bearing in mind that it's a team's race as opposed to an individual's race. It's teams of 3 riders compete. Now, if one of the riders doesn't make a fence, pulls out, the whole team is eliminated. So it's in the interest of all team members to help their fellow team member over fences. Well, the course built by Mr. Bob Simpson it's a beautiful course. It's of course an excellent venue, the Rothbury Estate, and spectators can see almost all of the course from any one position. There are some very good vantage points. It's going to be quite exciting. There's water to be crossed, there's ditches to be jumped and banks to be climbed, so it's not a straight out show jumping course by any means. It covers a distance of a little over 2.5 kilometres. There's 21 obstacles, and it's going to test quite a few of the horses. And the good thing about it, even though we have some top event riders there, we have some very young riders coming, but it's anybody's guess who's going to win on the day. Very unique to New South Wales particularly. It's sort of a cross-country point-to-point steeplechase race.
Right. So time is important.
Time is the deciding factor on who wins, bearing in mind that it's a team's race as opposed to an individual's race. Teams of 3 riders compete. Now, if one of the riders doesn't make a fence, pulls out, the whole team is eliminated. So it's in the interest of all team members to help their fellow team member over fences. Of course, an excellent venue, the Rothbury Estate, and spectators can see almost all of the course from any one position. So that's a very good vantage point. It's going to be quite exciting. There's water to be crossed, there's ditches to be jumped and banks to be climbed. So it's not a straight out show jumping course by any means. It covers a distance of a little over 2.5 kilometres. There's 21 obstacles, and it's going to test quite a few of the horses. And the good thing about it, even though we have some top event riders there, we have some very young riders coming, but it's anybody's guess who's going to win on the day.
Sure. Are the hounds involved? Will people be able to see the hounds in action?
Yes, the hunt will be parading the hounds. We'll have the hounds come to the course prior to the event starting, so that'll be about 9:30. Anybody wanting to see the hunt then in its full colour, and the hounds, the whole pack of hounds, they'll be brought through about 9:30.
They remain determined to enjoy the hunting season this year.
Yes, we're
the muddy conditions hampered.
One of Newcastle's least spoken about sporting stories is the pressure the Newcastle Basketball Association are under for funds in relation to loans on their magnificent courted Broadmeadow. I believe that pressure and that trouble will be put behind them very, very shortly, with an announcement to come that the Newcastle Kern Falcons have been, I think the word is, bought out by a private person. The Newcastle board will remain, and the players and club officials will be spoken to by President Warren Skelton on Monday night. The Newcastle board have approved the negotiations so far. It will certainly see the Falcons become a leader not only in the National Basketball League but also in sport generally, and become fully professional. The pride of Newcastle could lead the way in Australia. The man believed to be behind the move is a Sydney millionaire medico with known sporting interests. I can say no more.
There's only 3 more days of the school holidays left, and if you're lucky, you can catch the last sessions of the Woody Woodpecker Show at the Market Square Shopping Centre in the mall. This week, the show has been compared by Click the Clown, and there are lots of competitions and prizes to cater for everyone's taste. There were even adults who were enjoying the show just as much as the kids. Balloon blowing competitions seemed popular, and there was also a singing competition to pick out those who owned the best vocal cords. But the most amusing competition was the whistling contest.
Give us one more whistle. That wasn't bad. Marie wasn't bad. Now.
And if you think whistling is hard, then try it sometime with a mouthful of Stay biscuit. Woody Woodpecker himself was there to say hello to everybody, and on Thursday, Scooby-Doo will make a special appearance. There are 2 shows on each day at 12 o'clock and 1:30, a great idea for free entertainment during your last day before school returns.